Empty is that which contains nothing, that has no occupants. Whoever you are at some point in your life, you will contemplate emptiness, and as contradictory as it may seem, you will feel filled by the purest emptiness. As Grandma Death said in the movie Donnie Darko, all living creatures on this earth die alone. I had wanted to address loneliness in some media piece for a while, but I could never find one that we really liked, until I came to a somewhat obvious consensus: cartoons. In many cartoons from our childhood, we end up contemplating emptiness, and in this video, I'm going to talk about it quite literally. That is, vast and completely devoid of beings in one of the oldest cartoons of our childhood, even in newer cartoons such as The White Void of Pocoyo, or literally appearing out of nowhere, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. But of course, we are not going to address any of these cartoons in this video, right? The cartoon that comes to my mind when it comes to emptiness is SpongeBob SquarePants. After all, the entire cartoon takes place in the emptiest place in the world for us humans, the bottom of the sea, both on its surface and its depths. And honestly, I don't know which of the two is more distressing, the turbulent sea, where we see cargo ships being swallowed, or the infinite vastness that exists meters and meters below the surface. Seriously, not even in GTA 5 I can't swim down without feeling terrible anguish. Okay, but how does this fit into SpongeBob SquarePants? SpongeBob SquarePants is a children's cartoon, and this is worked on in only 2 episodes. At least I only remembered 2, Rock Bottom and Graveyard Shift. In the episode Rock Bottom, SpongeBob and Patrick go to Glove World and everything goes as expected. The problem is the return. The two end up taking the wrong bus and end up in a place next to Bikini Bottom, the dreaded Rock Bottom. And here we see the emptiness of this cartoon showing its face. The emptiness presented in Rock Bottom and the bottom of the sea are different. The bottom of the sea is totally rich in life and ecosystem, but here's the thing. The emptiness of the sea bottom is totally surrounded by socially useless beings. You are alone in an immensity, and even though SpongeBob is a marine creature, he also cannot settle in this rock bottom. It can be said that Bikini Bottom is one of the few places with rational beings in this cartoon.
Did you say chocolate?
Yes, sir!
Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!
And in this rock bottom, he even meets other beings, but they appear to be completely irrational, which makes our dear SpongeBob scared and fear for his own safety. This is aggravated even more when Patrick manages to catch the bus to Bikini Bottom and SpongeBob ends up being left behind. The settings are dense and the completely dark horizon increases our curiosity about what this darkness is hiding. Few episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants work on the density of the seabed. And of course, because this is a children's cartoon, all this macabre atmosphere ends up being greatly softened. In this episode, we see a lot of slapstick comedy, such as SpongeBob missing several buses for very silly reasons or him trying to communicate with these other creatures in a very clumsy way. Of the many times he misses the bus, you might start to wonder why he doesn't just leave on foot. He can't, because the exit from Rock Bottom to Bikini Bottom is a 90-degree inclined wall that only the bus can climb. At a certain part of this episode, SpongeBob mentions that the darkness of that place is very intense, so much so that he has the idea to close his eyes, because the darkness of his closed eyes was not as dark as what he saw with them open. Later in the episode, he manages to get out because a creature tied a Glove World balloon to his arm, which makes him float up that wall. The strangest thing is that when he leaves Rock Bottom, we can see that it is still daytime in Bikini Bottom. That is, Rock Bottom is so deep in the sea that sunlight does not reach the bottom. In this episode, we saw what night is like in Rock Bottom and got a small idea of how distressing it would be to be in the situation SpongeBob was in. Unfortunately, the cartoon does not explore this atmosphere in almost any other episode, except in the case of the episode Graveyard Shift. In this episode, we just watched the night, the density, the emptiness, all that we saw, we will see in another place in the episode Graveyard Shift. But unlike the previous episode, where we saw it in a place separate from Bikini Bottom, we will see it exactly there. In this episode, out of sheer greed, Mr. Krabs decides that the Krusty Krab will become a 24-hour restaurant, and obviously SpongeBob and Squidward are left to work. Of course, in a scary episode of the cartoon, the things that are theoretically meant to scare will be doubled down by the creators. It's when SpongeBob needs to take out the trash that imminent fear appears. Fear of what, you ask me? Of loneliness and what might be out there, looking through the windows of the Krusty Krab. Even at the moment when SpongeBob goes out to take the trash to the street, we can see the greenish tone of the horizon, the empty houses, the sky flowers that almost seem withered, and the harmony between the colors ends up creating an atmosphere that strongly resembles what we find in photos of liminal spaces. This episode is the famous hash-slinging slasher episode, where Squidward Squidward invents a story to scare SpongeBob, which in theory ends up kind of coming true. And it is precisely because this episode wants to be terrifying that we can find these bizarre moments. The creators decided to bring to light the darkest side of Bikini Bottom around the Krusty Krab. In certain scenes, we can see the restaurant in the middle of nowhere, with nothing around it, not a soul in sight. At least, this setting brings me a strange sensation. It's as if I had a big room and my bed was in the middle of the room, and I needed to sleep in that bed. I don't know what's in front of me, on my sides, or behind me, or the feeling of walking down a hallway that I've never walked before, and my back being completely unprotected. Like if you turned off the light in the hallway at night, and even though you know it's your house, you still get scared. It's funny that the episode really tries to cause fear with the figure of the hash-slinging slasher, but it obviously fails after all. This is a children's cartoon. For me, in this episode, the greatest discomfort comes from looking at Bikini Bottom at night. Just as Rock Bottom is lonely, Bikini Bottom is lonely. I want you to understand that everything I mentioned in this video is not the focus of these episodes, and is also not explored at all. They are quick scenes that rarely appear, but even though they rarely appear, they manage to make me uncomfortable. I really wanted an episode that would explore this kind of thing more deeply, but that won't happen anytime soon. In this video, I mentioned the episodes that touch on this atmosphere, but if you know of any others, feel free to comment. Your comment will be very welcome. If you're watching this video this far, consider subscribing. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.